ideas you might have in terms of reaching the people to tell the story and to get their part of the story?
Well, you mentioned, you touched on, well, in this pandemic, really and truly, I would say we are blessed. Really and truly, the technology has been our advantage in terms of the internet, because we are not able to be in the same physical space with each other because of the difficulty of the pandemic. Persons can easily contract the disease and so on. And so, persons, the fact that we have the internet as a one important one today in 2021, one of the things I said, we don't want to use 1970 technology. We want to use 2021 technology to reach out to the masses in conjunction with because one thing about technology, one of the things I have seen is that the radio, where we're on right now, the radio is a very, very, I would say, fundamental medium of communication, very fundamental. Radio is something whatever it means, it's not the physical set, but it's the way, the transmission. And so, using technology is, I would say, using the modern technology is a general means. And of course, we want to be incorporative because we know that yes, there's the young. We want to include the all ages. We want to include the young. We want to include the middle age, and we want to include the seniors. I want to say the old. I say the seniors because it depends on how. Because seniors may not consider themselves old, but we want to find the means of reaching out. So we don't want to use technology and then a certain segment is not. So we try whichever segment suits, because we are in an age where more and more persons are adapting to, especially in a small island here like NEVIS, we see more and more persons actually adapting to the modern technology. They see that's important now. They may not have appreciated it years back, a few years now, but now it's becoming even more important. So I said the technology, using the means of technology, of course we can have one-on-one conversation. Of course, in this COVID time, we have to use the protocol, social distancing, and so on. If we interact, within a closed physical space, but wherever it's possible, it will be used.
Well, I have a picture in my mind, right? A picture that unfortunately I did not get to take, but it's still very vivid in my mind. About 6 years ago, I saw a senior, I'm using the term you use, a senior, on a donkey. Mm-hmm. And while he was on the donkey, he was on his cell phone. Now that's a classic picture. You don't get those anytime. So you're looking back at the historical sites, but you're using modern technology to get the message across. It's like the old man on the donkey, kind of thing. That classic picture, I'm sorry that I just didn't get it. It would have been treasured.
Well, most indeed.
No, Miss Richards, Lilith. Let's talk a little bit about an overview of our project here in NEVIS. Could you give a brief overview, just to remind the general public, for those who have been listening, and just to update those who are new to this program? Give a bit of an overview of this project.
Sure. We are at this time seeking to do our second tentative list to UNESCO. The first tentative list was for the city of Charlestown. And as some of you may be aware, that was not successful because of the numerous changes done to Charlestown itself. The visiting UNESCO team did not find that it had integrity. Far too many structures had been removed, and structures introduced that were not incompatible with the historical nature of the town or the historical fabric of the town. So it was decided that it was not a good candidate for our World Heritage Site. However, they did encourage that we look outside of Charlestown at a wider picture, because there was much in NEVIS. It was not all in one place, and they pointed to some of the sites, including the estates and Bath Hotel, which was included in Charlestown, but on its own, it could not add integrity to Charlestown. So it was decided that we would have put together another tentative list And this tentative list would take into consideration historical or heritage sites around the island. And so, with the assistance of archaeologists, Barry and Paul, they're from England, Barry Gamble, I think that it was decided that the approach would be NEVIS, an early agro-industrial landscape. And this was focusing on the sugar estates, on the wealth that it was supposed to have brought the British Empire at a time, during its when it was functioning optimally. And so they also listed a few sites, which turns out to be approximately 17 sites, including Bath Hotel, some churches, New River, Coconut Walk, the Hermitage, Montpelier, Old Manor, yes, and so on. 17 of these sites, which would now be included on a national tentative list, and this would go to UNESCO. Once approved, we could begin to prepare a dossier for a World Heritage Site.
As you mentioned that, we would have heard the term OUV. We have heard that term loosely used around. What is OUV and why is it important?
OUV it means outstanding universal value. Now it's a requirement for UNESCO that sites must show outstanding universal value. Because it's on a World Heritage list, it's not on a national list. It has to be competing with sites around the world. So it has to have outstanding universal value in terms of how beneficial it is to the global community to have this site listed as a World Heritage Site. How did it affect the global community? What impact did it have on the global community? Maybe not directly, but indirectly. So in most of the sites in NEVIS, they are indirectly. In the case, I think it was only in the case of Bath Hotel where the impact may have been more directly because of the persons who traveled here to get treatment at the
bath space.
Yes. But in most cases it was indirectly because of the changing landscape and the sugar production, how that would have affected the Western world. And so the theme in itself indicates that these islands did add significantly to the wealth
of the big countries.
And so in that light, you can show that they did add, then you can show universal value.
And that's where the story begins.
Yes.
Dawson, picking up on what Lilith just said, you recognize the fact that in making this grand bid for these sites to become a World Heritage part of the UNESCO package, we're in a contest, we're in a competition. It isn't like it's just NEVIS alone. How difficult, how does that make the task monumental to know that NEVIS is coming up against a lot of big countries in the contest?
I would say indeed, it is indeed a monumental task because, I mean, the tiny NEVIS against many countries in the world and they're being considered. But I would say it's monumental, but it's not impossible, and it's not new in the terms of we have seen other islands in the region, other that has attained such such distinction. We have our sister island, think it's the Brimstone Hill Fortress.
Exactly.
A World Heritage Site. I know in Dominica, there is I think two, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I know about the Montra Park in Dominica that has become a World Heritage Site. In Barbados, we see the Bridgetown and the Garrison have become World Heritage Sites, UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So it's monumental, but it's not familiar, and we are in familiar. I would say we are in familiar territory because we are not the first in the region to have make our bid of becoming a world of having our sites become UNESCO World Heritage status.
And the beautiful thing about it is that the comforting thought is that David did kill Goliath, right?
Yes.
So we could be small, but we could be taller in the process.
Indeed, yes.
But at this point, we'll take a break. We'll take a station ID as well, and we'll be back with you.
Sugar City St. Kitts, keep it sweet. Keep listening to Vaughn.
We are in this together. World Heritage nomination. We are in this together, and we need the help of everyone. NEVIS early colonial and agro-industrial landscape that is so beloved by all. We have the Bat Hotel and all the plantations. The forts and slave market are so vital. Share your information to all generations. We are in this together.
Well, thank you very much, and we are back with Talking World Heritage. I'm Curtis Morton on behalf of the NEVIS World Heritage Committee. With me is Miss Lilith Richards and Mr. Dawson Otley. Lilith, we have also, you mentioned it a while ago, the term tentative list. Could you just further explain what is a tentative list and why is it important?
The tentative list is a list of sites that any country would like UNESCO to consider for World Heritage. Now, member countries are countries that have signed on to this program. I think it's NEVIS, having done so several years ago. And so what we do is we provide them with a list of sites that we think or that we would like them to consider for World Heritage.
Okay.
And once they've approved these sites, because we would have to complete a form to show that the sites qualify in terms of integrity, outstanding universal value, and how original they are.
Okay.
And what impacts they may have.
What makes the story unique?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And how they contribute to the overall theme that we are presenting. And once these sites have been approved, after 1 year, we can then prepare a nomination dossier that would allow us to ask for that site to become a World Heritage Site.
Nice.
Now, in our case, we have what we call a serial nomination.
Okay.
So that there are clusters of sites. I think there are 9 clusters. And if all of the sites are accepted on the tentative list,
It will be like a
yes, then we will simply go for cluster 1, then cluster 2 in what we
Okay,
refer to as a
okay.
serial nomination.
okay.
So we don't have to keep submitting a tentative
Okay,
list.
one by one.
Yes.
Now I have a question on that though, because somebody just tuned into the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean Vaughn Radio, and they're wondering what are they really talking about. So, could you just again remind us of some of the sites that have been listed in these clusters that have been proposed?
Okay, I'll start with the churches because most people are familiar with them. And the Methodist Church, Charlestown. This is a very good candidate because it's an early school. The research showed that it's one of the first schools
Like a church school.
constructed for black people outside of
Right.
Africa. So you have the Methodist Church, you have the Anglican Church, Charlestown, and the St. Thomas's Anglican Church. These two churches are very important because of the tombs that are there. As you go through, you will see the tomb of some very wealthy Nevisians who once owned estates.
And some of them are inset within the church itself,
Yes,
in the flooring.
Yes, yes. So they become. It gives presence to them because it's not just a church. It's a place for these very important people, their last resting place.
Okay.
So we have those churches. We have added the Gentleland Methodist Church, Terry Scottle's church, yes, and the St. John's Victory Church.
Okay.
We've also cemeteries, 2 cemeteries, the Cholera Cemetery and what we call the Columbus Cemetery, which is really a public cemetery on Low Street. And mostly because of the graves there and how far back they date.
And the history behind, the story behind why it's there.
It's there, yes. And then we have the Jewish cemetery. And well, most of us just know it as to be a Jewish cemetery, but the Sephardic Jews apparently moved around the Caribbean, perhaps globally, and so that is a resting place for them. And then you have other sites. You have the estates, as mentioned, Montpelier, and Old Manor, Coconut Walk, New River, Eden Brown. And I don't know if I'm forgetting any, I'm sure.
Bath Hotel.
And Bath Hotel, including Bath House and Bath Spring.
Right.
And we have Bath Bugs.
Fort Charles is involved.
Fort
as well.
Charles is involved, and Nevis Peak.
Nice.
And Nevis Peak because it's the first thing that drew them to the island.
A matter of
The
fact, they thought there was
snow-covered, the snow, what looked like a snow-covered, the Lady of the Snow. So it was what attracted them to Nevis.
in the first place.
Yes, and it is still our greatest forestry area, or natural habitat. So that is included as a natural site.
Okay, 3,232 feet
Yes.
up in the air.
Yes.
Dawson, you did some research thanks to Mr. Mr. Gilbert,
Yes.
right? Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the World Heritage sites that would have already been established?
Okay, yes, with pleasure. I've been in receipt of a list of World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage sites within Latin America and the Caribbean. We have in Antigua, we have Argentina, we have Barbados, I believe Barbuda, Belize, Brazil, Costa Rica, Chile. I'll give there's the numbers as well in terms of how many sites. Let me just go back again. There's one in Antigua, one in Argentina. In Barbados there's one. This is Barbuda if I'm not mistaken. That's one. Belize, one. In Brazil there are about 7.
Wow.
Costa Rica there's 4. In Chile there's 1. Cuba there are 9. Sites. Dominica there's 1. Dominican Republic there's 1. El Salvador 1. Guatemala 1. Haiti 1. Honduras 1. Jamaica 1. Mexico 6. Nicaragua 2. Panama 5. St. Kitts and Nevis 1, which I mentioned earlier, the Brimstone Hill Fortress. St. Lucia it's 1. That's I believe the Pitons. Suriname 2, Uruguay 3, and I think that's Venezuela 3.
And of course we want to change the status quo of St. Kitts Nevis and make it 2.
Make it 2, yes, indeed.
Yeah,
Yes, indeed.
that's the way to go. Lynette, back to you. You know that we have federation, so it's not just Nevis, but of course St. Kitts already has a site in Brimstone Hill Fortress. So how do we connect in terms of the federation pursuit or Nevis's pursuit, and how does that link up with St. Kitts in terms of a federation project?
Well, as we know, when we're dealing with international organizations, they don't deal with a state, they deal with the country. So whilst we are preparing our tentative list, it has to first go to the National World Heritage Tentative List, which is in St. Kitts,
Okay.
where it would be vetted, and then a national tentative list will be sent forward.
So the federal minister would have to be involved.
The
It's not
federal
just-
minister is the chair of the
Okay.
National World Heritage Committee.
And my understanding is that St. Kitts is not in a competition, they are assisting us in this bid.
Well, from my understanding, St. Kitts did say that they were not going to enter any sites for the next review, that they would allow us to submit the sites from NEVIS.
That's very nice, and my understanding is that they have been very helpful in this regard.
Yes.
In all
Yes.
aspects.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, Dawson, how do you see it from a public relations aspect, in terms of probably reaching out to some of the media houses in St. Kitts? Do you see that as a possibility?
Oh, most definitely. When I will say this, and considering when I was in my previous post, and then when I was in another ministry, I would have, if I send a communication, I don't just focus on NEVIS.
Okay.
I reach out to St. Kitts because we're one federation. I don't want, it's not just about NEVIS,
Okay.
but we want our federation, our people, we're one country as we stand at this point in time. That we are one country and we want person, because I've seen even more recently in this pandemic, more Kittitians are coming over to NEVIS to vacation because they can't travel. They're not able to travel as freely
Okay.
as they would love to. So where they find, they come to NEVIS, and of course they get to discover NEVIS. Because some, they see NEVIS, they see what people call the sombrero island from where they are, because NEVIS looks like a sombrero, or they see, well, and they haven't discovered it. And it needs to be read, so it's like they come into a place of discovery. So extending this information over to St. Kitts, or extending the importance, it will be very, very beneficial for Kittitians to come and really, from a public relations standpoint, we want to give them, it's like we are marketing, we are selling NEVIS in a way to them, for them to want to come to NEVIS. They want to come to NEVIS to enjoy what NEVIS has to offer.
Lynette, do you see, in terms of outreach, probably one of the outreach areas could be in the schools? Like, how do you teach World Heritage and cherishing historical sites to a 5-year-old, for instance? Is it possible to bring it down to their level, let them see the site in terms of what they call it, like the school going out on a walk, and they see the site and be able to say some little thing to a 5-year-old to say these are precious, and then you get them to get that inbuilt growing up until they become advanced in age and could pass it on to their children and grandchildren. How does that seem possible at all?
It is, because children love stories. And the story of sugar and the story of how people come to be here is something we have not yet written. It's always been prepared for us.
Okay.
But we've never
Their story. It's
yes,
their
we've
story.
never sat down to write the story ourselves. To say, this is how we've come here and this is how we've lived here. I remember as a child going on a field trip to Hamilton Estate. And I still remember the story quite vividly. We were asked to pack our lunch. My grandmother gave me my favorite soda, which was a Red Bryson.
from James Brooks.
I can't remember, but I know I had a Red Bryson and some sausage and bread. In those days, Panko Hanley used to sell those little round penny bread.
Yes.
And I had 2 of those with a piece of sausage in it, wrapped up, and I went to school.
Okay.
And I remember the gentleman walking us along and explaining how sugar was made. Showing us the copper and telling us this was the hottest
what
one.
age you're talking about?
I was in primary school.
Primary school. Okay.
Yeah, I was in primary school. And I remember us sitting outside under either orange or shaddock trees to eat our lunch. And I remember when we left there, they picked a lot of oranges, and I think they were oranges, and
With permission, I hope.
it was the owners who gave us.
Okay, great.
Well,
Okay.
in those days they had overseers.
Okay.
So the overseer, well, I learned now that they were overseer. But the gentleman who explained to us When they took us out into the garden, another gentleman loaded us up with fruits. I always remember those estates as a fun place to be.
So that made a vivid impact on you, because you talked about it just now like
Yes.
it's just happened yesterday.
Yes, it was.
And that was many years ago.
That was many years ago. I was a child in what we used to call chapel school in those days.
So then that story can make an impression on the very young.
Yes.
And
Because-
once that impression is made, it's there for life.
Right, because like I said, children love stories. It's something they don't have to have the full, you can
Right.
tell them
Mhm.
about it in a way that could appeal to them.
Nice. Okay, we'll go to our next station break, and if Ras Iroy is listening, this is your moment after the break. You can give us a call.
When VON vibrates, the whole Caribbean must shake.
8:60 a.m. The Powerhouse.
We are in this together. World Heritage nomination. We are in this together, and we need the help of everyone. NEVIS early colonial and agro-industrial landscape that is so beloved by all. We have the Bat Hotel and all the plantations. The forts and slave market are so vital. Share your information to all generations. We are in this together. We are in this together. World Heritage nomination. We are in this together, and we need the help of everyone. NEVIS early colonial and agro-industrial landscape that is so beloved by all. We have the Bat Hotel and all the plantations. The forts and slave market are so vital. Share your information to all generations. We are in this together.
Caring and sharing is essential.
Well, thank you very much, and we're back, and we're talking World Heritage on the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, Vaughan Radio. I'm Curtis Morton on behalf of the NEVIS World Heritage Committee, alongside Lilith Richards and Dawson Utley. We are waiting the call from another World Heritage Committee member, the man himself, Ras Iroy. If you're listening, Iroy, you can give us a call. But in the meantime, Lilith, we would have listed the sites that are being proposed, but maybe you can tell us about the deadlines, because I know that there are some deadlines in place. We don't just go haphazardly about and just say, okay, these are the sites we're proposing, but there have to be certain things done and certain deadlines to be met. Could you kind of explain that to us?
Well, it is, in briefly, our deadline to submit the tentative list to the World Heritage Committee in St. Kitts is the 30th of September.
Whoa,
So
that's like 1 month away.
1 month away. So between now and then, we would have edited our lists and packaged them so that they could be sent, so that they could be reviewed in St. Kitts. And the tentative list submission to UNESCO is January next year. So this would allow the World Heritage Committee, the National World Heritage Committee in St. Kitts, to review the list, and if they need any changes or any modification, they would let us know before submitting it.
So it looks like, do we have a call? Apparently the Ras is on the line. Ras Iroy, are you there?
Yes, I greetings.
I forgot to do it properly. Greetings. So how are you, sir?
I am okay, despite some challenges
Okay.
today, but giving thanks.
Okay, giving thanks. Ras, you recently went on, you could say, a tour of NEVIS, assisting with the taking of some very important pictures which would form part of the whole presentation package. Probably you could just give us an update as to some of the pictures, some of the sites that you guys visited, and maybe even give us a hint as to the condition that you met them in.
Okay, it would be my pleasure. Good to join my colleagues here and Brand Radio as we all seek to achieve that task of getting NEVIS on that World Heritage page, you know. Something that I've had many mixed feelings and emotions about. But nevertheless, I think it's a great effort, it's a great project. And it's good when we could always revisit and rewrite and add the corrections and and so on to what has been written about our history. And the photo taking over the past couple of days was really a part of that, because it's, people would say a photo is worth a million words.
Yeah.
And so, part of our and I story as an African people, we would have passed on a lot of things verbally. But now, in the age of today, it is so easy to take a picture and have it years down the road. You can, do whatever you want to do with it. And so, in visiting these sites that were carefully selected to be part of that list for the World Heritage recognition, we would have visited a variety of sites. We visited churches, we visited natural habitats, natural springs, we visited some old sugar plantations, we visited, I think I mentioned churches already, and basically some general areas. We would have touched on places like the Cattle Church area, the Roundhill Estate on which Cattle Church lies. We would have gone to the famous Eden Brown Estate, went around the river, Coconut Walk. We also went to some of the hotels like the Old Manor, as it is right now, the Montpelier. We also went to both the St. John's Anglican Church and the St. George's Methodist Church. We also visited the Fort Charles and the Boggs area. And one of the places that we haven't gone there yet. We have a little challenge getting to it. It's the Mount Travers.
Mount Travers, okay.
So it's quite a bit of my history up there. So but it's definitely a place where we're going back. But what we would have recognized, Curtis, is that we really need to take better care of these sites. We've seen a lot of them overgrown. We would have seen, the results, the effects of vandalism.
Wow.
So it's crucial that we get the message out there to people as to why, we should not behave in a particular way to some of these historical sites. The areas though which were quite interesting, some of them though were in very, very good condition in terms of some of the structures.
Okay.
We would have seen some walls that would have toppled over, but the slabs of stones are still very much intact without any bit of local decent modern cement. Yeah, but all in all, I think being able to capture these places in photo, and then we'll be able to include them in our documents and in our submission.
Before I ask Lilith and Dawson to probably add something before you leave us, I'm just picturing in my mind, like taking a photo of one of these historical sites, and maybe a whole ton of bibush all across it. How does that impact the picture in your mind?
Well, it can both negative and positive.
Okay.
It will show what we are lacking and what we need to do, as a people, as departments, as ministries, to keep these sites, in better condition.
Okay.
I know a lot of them are centered around the whole tourism package, and that might not be on the rise now, but we must always think that whatever we have should be for locals first.
I agree.
Locals should be able to visit and appreciate.
I agree.
So yeah, that's definitely, a negative. The positive part of that, sometimes nature in itself adds a little beauty, The only thing is a tree growing out of a stone structure would actually weaken the structure.
Yeah, that's true.
And depending on the foliage too, they become sites where people dump garbage and so on.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But so it's better to do them, keep them clear of that excess vegetation.
Okay, let's see if Dawson and Lilith has a question for you.
Yes, Wes, good to hear from you. And you mentioned something that really I thought is very important from a public relations standpoint in terms of the vandalism. And that's one of the things I saw that's very important from a public relations standpoint, to make persons aware that that we should not vandalize, or we should safeguard these sites, safeguard these properties. Because I've heard and I've seen the vandalism, which has, it has really devalued, brought some devaluation of what, our product, our heritage. And we want, persons, and this is where persons really need to be educated. Because there are those, and this is what I've heard, and I say I heard, because I've heard of persons actually removing stones from certain structures. And I would say selling them to what we would term the experts, and because these stones, especially from these structures, are stones that are these were cut specially, and I believe is our ancestors, the enslaved. I don't want to say the slaves, but the enslaved Africans would have used whatever skill, whatever tool they had to do those cuts. So those are custom cut. It's not like the tools that are used today, and so they cannot be I should say replicated. And so the safeguarding, the protection of our historical sites are very important, and we want persons to be aware and not sell out our heritage. We don't want that. Yeah, we have seen it in other places. Other places in the Caribbean, certain places have sold out their heritage. NEVIS is not going to step into that, because we're putting ourselves as World Heritage. We don't want to go the opposite. And the vandalism will bring devaluation. And so, from a public relations standpoint, that will be very important to communicate to the public about safeguarding the structures that have been erected and have been icons in our history.
You got that, Russ?
Yes, I.
Okay. Lilith?
I just wanted to ask you a question. In another session with John, he indicated, Gilbert, that they had left some of the sites heavily bushed to prevent poaching. That would be stealing of stones and industrial machinery like coppers and parts and so on. Did you find that the sites that had more cob had less vandalism?
Big. And those in the more remote areas, I would have noticed, a higher level of vandalism. Plus, we were only focusing on some specific areas in some of the sites. But they're seen. This is seen quite evident in almost every area that we went, because you can tell sometimes, maybe not 100%, when a stone was removed or it could have dropped out to age, because of age and so on. Depends on how it was what was left or what is left of it, so to speak. But then you could see areas where structure is nice and particular stones, cornerstones, and all these things particularly removed.
I see. Okay.
Ras, before you leave, right? You know that those of us who grew up with our grandmothers, we have a particular vocabulary. Now, I know that Lilith just used the word just now, and some young people out there are wondering, what in the world is she talking about? She mentioned the areas with more cob. For the purpose of the young people, could you please explain to them what cob is? Because they don't have a clue.
Come up. Vegetation overgrown with all those wild wisps and hedges and so on, it's difficult to get to it. I think that's basically what it means.
I think one of these days we have to construct our own NEVIS dictionary, you agree?
Hey, listen, that is something that really should happen. I bought a Jamaican dialect dictionary in Jamaica in the early 80s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
And we have the ability. My good classmate, Taki Fitzroy Williams, he's one of the boss when it comes to writing the dialect.
Okay.
So we use it quite a lot amongst, our classmates. But yeah, the cover.
Well, Ross, I want to thank you so much, and we want to also extend our gratitude to the Adrian. I'm using some of your terms, to the Adrian Ounce, who went along with you and took the photos, etc. So we want to say thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
He was the main man, He was the one who did the work. I just told him what he looked for, and he perfected it,
Well, Ross, I want to thank you for calling, and I'm going to finish in your language. Bless up.
Yes, man. Bless up.
All right. Thank you, Ross. All right, folks, we'll take our final station ID and break, and we'll be back with the final moments of our program today.
Sugar City St. Kitts, keep it sweet. Keep listening to Vaughn.
We are in this together. World Heritage nomination. We are in this together, and we need the help of everyone. NEVIS early colonial and agro-industrial landscape that is so beloved by all. We have the Bat Hotel and all the plantations. The forts and slave market are so vital. Share your information to all generations. We are in this together.
Well, we're back. For those of you who are just joining us, you're listening to the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, Vaughn Radio, and we are talking World Heritage one more time this afternoon. I'm Curtis Morton, and I have with me Dawson Otley and Lilith Richards, and we're in the final moments of our program for today. We just heard from another committee member on the local World Heritage Committee, Ras Iroy, and we thank him so much for making that call. Lilith, as we wrap up, right? I tend to see there are steps to be taken. So the first step is to get all the information, collate the information, and we have a deadline initially of the 30th of September to get the information to who in St. Kitts exactly. Is it to the minister or to?
No.
Okay.
We would be sending to the UNESCO commissioner.
Okay.
And that information would then go to the National World Heritage Committee.
Before it goes to the commissioner, though, does it have to be vetted locally by, let's say, the minister here? What is the process?
Let me step back. We will complete the list and send it to the Ministry of Social Development.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
The Ministry of Social Development Minister is Mr. Eric Evelyn, and we've been working closely with the Permanent Secretary, Keith Glasgow.
Mm-hmm.
So this information will be sent to Mr. Glasgow.
And that will be well before the 30th.
Yes.
So even though we say the 30th, we still don't have all that time.
Right, because we do have to get it to Mr. Glasgow before the 30th so that he can arrange to have it
Better
delivered in St. Kitts.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And then,
But the committee itself that he has put together with the minister will vet the list.
okay, great.
And whilst we are working, archaeologists whom John is very closely, who has worked closely with John over the years, are providing assistance and vetting the list as we go.
As we go along. That is
Yes.
great.
Yes,
So by the time it gets to the ministry, it's already vetted.
yes,
They now will in turn get it to the commissioner in St. Kitts.
Yes.
Before, on or before the 30th.
Yeah, 30th.
Well, hopefully before the 30th.
yes, because we are working through IROI's department. And
Sustainable development.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
and so June, who is a part of this, constantly update the list. As we send them in, she would do that work. So
Okay.
we're not out there working by ourselves.
Right. There's a lot of people working.
Yes.
We're in this together.
Yes.
So when it gets to the commissioner now, what's the next step?
It will go to the National Committee. The National Committee can ask for changes or they can reject a site.
Oh,
So it is necessary for us to make the case for every site so that they can see the importance of it
okay.
to us. And they can see that it is likely that it will be accepted for the World Heritage Tentative List. So this is the reason why at this time it takes so much time. During this phase, it takes so much time doing the research, documenting the sites. They did give us a form, the UNESCO Commission,
Like a guideline.
a form that we have to fill in.
Okay.
And all the information they would require was on that form.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So you follow that guideline,
Yes.
and you should be good.
yes.
Now, some of the sites that are mentioned, even those that Rasayo I mentioned, and those that you mentioned, do we have all of the story details on them, or are we still working on? Because sometimes you would have heard something about a particular site, but maybe somebody else, and that's why the general public is so important in this. Maybe somebody else has some information to share. Are we done yet in terms of all the details with all of these sites?
Well, most of the sites are finished. The ones we had difficulty with would have been like bath bogs.
Okay.
We know that it is a natural area. But to bring the heritage side of it, how did it work for people when we came here? That required us to do a little research to see just exactly how it fitted. How did we utilize the site? I think going back, we all know that there was a time when catching crab was a big thing.
I think some people still do.
And so it would have provided resources for people, and some people would have fished there, and there would have been wild fruits. And because it was right off of Gallows Bay,
Which also has a story.
which also has a story of the Hangman's Bay, then there was a place for people to take refuge. So it had it, and it is still used by persons who come to NEVIS for that, in that
Okay,
manner.
okay.
Because I remember people used to fish there, and I used to have to say, "Oh no, you can't drag your net in the pond.
Okay.
You have to put in a line, otherwise you'll catch the little ones and the big ones, and things of that sort." And it was never discouraged. There was an attempt to guide the way people would fish. But I still think people go there to catch crab.
Okay. Yeah.
And fishermen still go through there to get sticks for their fish pot and different things.
Okay.
So it's still being used, though just how to include it as a part of our this colonial landscape, which is our theme, NEVIS, and early agro-industrial
How does it
commercial
fit
landscape.
into the story?
How does it? It fits in on our side. It fits in on our side. And so we would have used it, and we find that we're still using it.
Okay.
So it is a part of the landscape.
Dawson, in terms of the vandalism you spoke about, we go to the point now of protection, do you block out these sites, put a fence around them and a gate, and you have a gate man and you say nobody could come here, or it should always be open so that Nevisians could visit at any hour of the day that they choose, so people could do field trips, but monitored somehow? What would you propose?
Well, I think something has been started. Well, in some areas, in terms of one, because I think NEVIS, in part, there are several sites around the region, I know, and not necessarily World Heritage status, but historical sites in themselves that have actually have paid entries to them. I think NEVIS
Brimstone
Hill is actually one of them.
Yeah.
There is the person have paid, and NEVIS is like one of the. I don't think NEVIS has any, but I think we're looking at one of them right now as I will consider a prototype or a pilot. We started with New River in terms of having that one.
Dawson, I noticed you all put a gate down there. What's the significance of that?
Well, I would say with the gate down there, I think it was, I believe it was in the intent of protection, but also as the intent, because when as I say, my previous post where I was, because I was in the Ministry of Tourism at the time when this process was going on, and we looked at it and we saw that we want to, in terms of have a paid entry to, not just to collect money, but also as a means of maintenance. So hopefully those means of monetary means will help to maintain the site, because if persons are not, if persons are not having appreciation for it when it's open, they maybe have a great appreciation for it when it's protected. Yeah.
So, what do you think about that? What do you think about a little 5 years to go into New River?
Well,
going forward,
I think that the fee system is not a bad idea, but you have to be careful. You're not really saying to some people don't enter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's based on if you are really just collecting monies for the maintenance, then you have to consider a fee low enough that would
attract and not deter people.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So clearly 5 years would be too high, but
I just
yes. But I think that how this is done, it is a bit touchy, because most people would consider these sites to be theirs,
like a free for all. That's our thing.
It's theirs, and so there's always a question of
how
do you allow people to enter freely, but to have a guide you can only enter this area. To have a guided tour, you have to pay.
Okay.
If you want to buy a drink, you can buy a drink. If you want to buy some artifact, you can buy that.
Okay.
And so there may be other ways to.
all locals can enter free, non-nationals pay? Well, up in the air.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily like that approach. Not necessarily. Not because it's not, but I find it creates a two-class system.
Okay, I got you. I got you.
And all
I was just tossing out.
Yes, because if you're not paying, they're going to go to the person who is paying first.
Okay. That is
Yeah,
true.
they will ignore you because you're not paying. But this person is paying, so let me pay them some attention.
That's bad.
Yes.
Okay, final words. Dawson, with you, your final words as we wrap up.
I said this was really a wonderful hour of discussion. It was very fruitful, and I look forward to engaging and continually engaging. It goes beyond our 1 hour program, and we want to continue to extend and appeal to the public to really join, to come on board, and so we can highlight our heritage. I would like to talk some more, but time will not permit me at this time. So next time.
Okay. Lynette, your final words. You have the final say.
I'll say the same thing I said at my last session. We all have to remember that if you come to the face of the earth and you leave nothing behind, you practically erase. No one will remember you.
Wow.
Even though the history books may have written something about a group of people that look like they came from Africa, there's nothing more than tangible evidence that you were here. There's nothing like it. So preserving your history is preserving your legacy and your place on this earth.
Beautiful. And so, folks, we've come to the end of another edition of Talking World Heritage. I'm Curtis Morton on behalf of Lillette Richards and Dawson Utley and the entire World Community Heritage team here on NEVIS, saying thank you for listening. Do join us next time.
You're listening to Vaughn